Okay, well, good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us tonight for the monthly Beef Reproductive Task Force webinar series. We appreciate everyone that has joined us in the past for these. As a reminder, these are recorded and available on our Beef Reproductive Task Force YouTube channel, which you can access through our website at beefrepro.org. So with that, tonight we have Dr. Vitor Mercadante with us from Virginia Tech University. Vitor is a assistant professor there and has been on the task force for the last year. And tonight is going to be really talking to us about the cost effectiveness or the value behind artificial insemination and fixed time AI programs. So with that, Vitor, I'll turn it over to you, and I'll just say one last thing. For questions, we ask that you use the Q&A function in the Zoom webinar. So please get your questions in, and we'll get as many of those answered at the end tonight as we can. Thanks again for joining us. Vitor, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Kai, and good night, everyone. Good evening. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. My first slide here is here on purpose. I wanted to point out we're trying our best to have a presence on social media. So if you already don't follow us, please follow us on Facebook, on Twitter. Make sure that you check our YouTube channel. There you can access the previous webinar from Dr. Poehler in December, as well as my webinar probably within the next week or so. We'll be posting there, and then all the following webinars. Also, I want to make sure that everybody understands that even the presentations from the Apply Reproductive Strategies, which is our annual meeting, are available on our website and on our YouTube channel. And on our website, you can access previous recordings from the ARSBC meeting. So please make sure that you go there and check it out. It's really good resources with a lot of information. I also wanted to highlight one thing that this is our website, and under there you have the protocol link that will send you to our list of protocols that we recommend. So we just recently released the 2021 protocols. So this is the sheet for the beef cow protocols as well as the beef heifer protocols. So I wanted to point that out to you guys. So make sure that you check that out. And we're really excited this year. We're releasing kind of fresh of a new thing, our semen protocol sheet. So a list of the protocols that we review the data and we know that those protocols will be successful when using for semen. So this is new. I wanted to make sure I highlighted that so that everyone understands and know that this is available. I think it's a great resource. So again, make sure that you go on our website and check our social media presence as well. So, but as Dr. Poehler mentioned, today we're gonna try and talk about fixed time AI and talk about the value of fixed time AI and really try to understand if it pays off to use that technology. So we all seen this. If you're in the beef industry or not, we understand it's going to be a lot of people. It's going to be a lot of us in the world in 2050, right? About 10 billion people now. We used to say it's going to be 9 billion people. We're getting closer to 10 billion people. And we're going to have to feed all those people, all those folks. And to do that, we're going to have to really focus on increasing efficiency so that we can produce enough food to feed those people. Now, there's arguments for how we distribute that food and our efficiency of not wasting food. And those are all concerns that are valid and good points. But undoubtedly, we need to increase production to be able to meet that demand. So if you're in the beef industry as well, it's not surprising for you that we usually get a bad name as far as global warming. People really have turned on beef and dairy production and livestock in general, animal agriculture, as this bad guy behind global warming. and we get a lot of publicity, bad publicity because of that. But when we look at the data, it's really, that's not the story, right? It's a different thing. According to the IPCC, there's only about 5% of the direct emissions in the United States that are attributed to livestock. We usually hear that livestock, a cow is worse than a car or a truck, and that's not really true. And the other thing that's really important is to understand how the greenhouse gases that are produced in animal agriculture get recycled into the earth and through the methane cycle, as when in comparison to fossil fuel greenhouse gas emissions, they're really we struggle to get that upcycle again. So there's a big difference there, and hopefully we all understand this, but we need to make sure that we're telling that story. And what's really frustrating is that we get this bad name, but we've been doing a great job on increasing efficiency. So this is data from the past 50 years, looking at beef production in your blue bar there, your blue line, and the orange line is number of cattle. So if you look, what we've been able to do here in the United States, we're producing more beef with less animals, right? And that's what efficiency is, to produce more with less. So if we need to be able to tell a different story here, because we're doing a good job on beef production for sure. And a lot of that efficiency has come through to reproduction, right? So to compare the two largest beef producers in the world, the United States and Brazil, where I'm from, just to give you an idea of how good of a job we're really doing here in the United States. If we compare herd size between the United States and Brazil, Brazil has about 230 million head of cattle. It is the largest commercial herd in the world. And the US has about 95, so less than half of the herd that Brazil has. When we look at beef production, this is billions of pounds of beef produced every year. The US produces more beef than Brazil, with less than half of the cattle, right? So this is efficiency. This is, it's amazing how we're being able to achieve this level of efficiency and productivity in the United States. And a lot of that is due to our ability to increase efficiency on nutrition, but as well as reproduction. So we're doing a good job, but there's definitely room to improve, right? So if you're a cow-calf producer in Brazil, in Australia, anywhere, or here in the United States, your goal is the same. You need to produce calves, because we sell pounds of calf at the end of the year, right? That's how we make money. So your goal really needs to be that to produce one healthy calf that has a good genetic potential to perform, and we need to do that, get that calf for every cow in our operation. We need to do that every year. So to do that, we really need to focus on reproductive efficiency. And the way I like to define reproductive efficiency is to maximize pregnancy rate as early as possible in the breeding season, and then to develop or select replacement heifers that have high fertility. And we want to do all that as the lowest cost possible. And if we can do all this, then I think we achieve reproductive efficiency, right? And an emphasis here early in the breeding season, and then we'll discuss this, how important that is, and the power that Astro Synchronization and fixed time AI has to help us achieve this goal. So if we look at the cost of beef production on cow-calf, feed for sure is our largest cost. And then there's things like animal health, your veterinary bill, making sure that you're vaccinating your cattle, costs that are associated with equipment and facilities, things that you need to have in place so that we can manage our cattle. Heifer development, it's a big cost as well. But breeding for sure is up there as one of the top costs on a beef cow-calf operation. So If you think about how we make money on a cow-calf operation, in really simple terms, our profit is our income minus our costs, right? And what's the income on a cow-calf operation? It's calves, right? And we also make money by selling some cool animals, those older cows or those older bulls that no longer are not productive anymore. But for sure, your emphasis needs to be on producing those calves, right? That's where the majority of the income is going to come on a cow-calf operation. Now, how can we achieve reproductive efficiency? And there's several things that affect reproductive efficiency. So there's not a single thing that will fix it and help us achieve reproductive efficiency. So I like to think it as an equation, right? It's a sum of things that include management, nutrition, and animal health are really important. Make sure you have a high selection pressure for efficiency and reproduction. So, for example, by cooling animals that don't get pregnant, those cows or heifers that do not become pregnant on the breeding season, or even having a breeding season, will really help us increase the selection pressure for reproductive efficiency. And then lastly is taking advantage of the reproductive technologies that are available on our toolbox for helping us achieve reproductive efficiency. So there are several reproductive technologies and things that some people might even think about it as a reproductive technology, but having a breeding season, for example, right? Making sure that you are applying the selection pressure to your herd. Early weaning can be used as strategically as a way to improve reproductive efficiency of cows. And it's been used in several places, especially when you're coming out on a drought or in a situation where your cows have very low body condition score. Doing early weaning could help us get cows cycling and then getting pregnant earlier. But the most traditional things that we understand and try to think about when we talk on reproductive technologies are artificial insemination, which has been around for a long time. It's not a new technology by any means. It's been heavily utilized in several countries around the world in other species. And then more recently, over the last 30, almost 40 years now, the advent of Astro Synchronization and our ability to understand the Astro cycle and how we can control that Astro cycle really well now, which allowed us to do fixed time AI, right? Synchronization of ovulation, and then now we can AI those cattle all at the same time. So the advantages of artificial insemination are nothing new, but disease prevention, it's a big thing. But primarily, the biggest advantage of using artificial insemination is really the ability to buy any bull or the best bulls available for the breed for a fraction of the price, right? It's really this widespread selection of bulls that are available to use, right? With proven genetics and the ability, again, to buy that $1 million bull, the best bull in the breed, for a fraction of that price, right? For $20, $25, and sometimes even less than that. So among other things, allows us to do crossbreeding. I mentioned Brazil. Brazil's been booming on the use of artificial insemination because of the ability to use Bostaro's genetics, right? To buy Angus, Hereford, Charolais, Simmental genetics from the best breeders in the United States and add them to their cattle in Brazil or in Australia or in South Africa. So it's really an amazing technology that has allowed us to really achieve great genetic improvement over the last 50, 60 years. Now, it is a great technology, but if you look at the percentage of operations in the United States that are utilizing artificial insemination, we're really lagging behind, right? There's about 11.6% according to the latest USDA census on the use of technology on beef production. And you can see a clear trend, the larger the producer, the more advantage they're taking of those technologies. So about 30% of the producers that have 200 cows or more are using artificial insemination on their operation. And only about 9% of those smaller producers that have 1 to 50 cows are really using artificial insemination. And it's important to remind that here in the United States, the majority of operations will have 50 cows or less. So there's still a lot of room to grow and a lot of people to convince. And hopefully today we'll convince a couple people that using artificial insemination, especially with Astro Synchronization, can pay off. Right? So, like I said, artificial insemination has been around for a long time, but a big, I don't know what happened here, apologize. That's great, I'm sorry. Okay, let's try again. Okay, we're back in business. I apologize for that. So the use of Astro Synchronization has really helped us implement and utilize artificial insemination, because before we needed to heat detect animals and make sure that we're doing a good job of heat detection, which is can be tricky sometimes. And in larger operations, that could really be difficult. So now we understand the Astro cycle. We know how to manipulate and how to control, and we can synchronize ovulation, which allows us to do fixed time AI. And really, we learned that the benefits of using synchronization and fixed time AI go beyond the genetic improvement of using artificial insemination, right? So the biggest advantages of using fixed time AI is the ability to induce cyclicity. So again, for those animals that are in poor body condition score, or those heifers that have struggled a little bit, that have not reached puberty, we can induce cyclicity and we can help them become pregnant earlier, right? The ability of AI animals without the need to heat detect is just amazing, right? Has been such a groundbreaking development, especially for those larger operations. So that you go in South Florida and those, or Texas and California would have really larger operations with 5,000-10,000 animals. It's impractical to do artificial insemination without Astro Synchronization, right? But primarily, the biggest thing is really the ability to have more cows pregnant by AI in a shorter period of time. And that's one of the biggest advantage, right? So fixed time AI, especially on beef cattle, has been around since the early 90s. And over the last 30 years has really developed, and we have done a great job on refining those protocols, and we do a great job with synchronization. So if we look at the adoption of those technologies, again, just like artificial insemination, the majority of people that are using artificial insemination in the beef cow-calf world are doing that through the use of fixed time AI. So very similar to that adoption of artificial insemination, we see that the smaller producers still lagging behind, only about 5% of them using Astro Synchronization and fixed time AI. And then our larger producers, about 25% of them, those producers that have more than 200 cows, taking advantage. But overall, again, about 7% of the operations in this country using fixed time AI. So great room to improve, so that we can even be even more efficient on producing beef on this country. So if it's that great and it works well, why do we usually only see about 7 or 8% of the producers utilizing this technology? And one of the things that I've been able to realize over this 10 years or so here in the United States, and talking to people and working with producers, is that we call the hassle factor, right? People don't want to have to bring their cattle to the chute 3 or 4 times, or they tried a fixed time AI once and they had lower pregnancy rates. They were promised 60%, 50%. They had 30% the first year, 40%. They get frustrated, and then they think it doesn't work, and then they don't use it again. So really, fixed time AI, and as any other technology, is really a process. So to illustrate that point, I want to show you some data. During my PhD, I was working with Dr. Cliff Lamb when he was in Florida, and we did this big project in South Dakota, and it was spent a summer there. And for me, coming from Brazil and spending time in Florida, and then spending that summer in South Dakota, was just amazing. It was a really good experience. But the project itself, it's not important here. I don't want to share that, but I just want to share some of the data. And we spent 4 months there synchronizing and AIing about 1,700 head of cows on 8 different operations, right? So this is pregnancy rates to those 8 operations, okay? And you can see that we go from the mid 60s to the low 40s, right? And again, like I said, a lot of people sometimes when they're starting to use fixed time AI, they're really hoping for those lower upper 60s, right, results. But in reality, that fluctuation is quite normal. And if we do an average there, it's around 50%. So the 50% pregnancy rate, it's really a good goal to have, and a realistic goal to have when using fixed time AI. There are operations that can do better, and there will be years, sometimes other operations that are not going to do as well, okay? But what's the difference between those operations? And when we look at this, those herds that had 50% or less, they were using time AI for the first time, okay? And then when we look at those 3 herds that had the better results to pregnancy rates on fixed time AI, they were using fixed time AI for at least 5 years, okay? So it's really important to keep that in mind. It is a process, okay? And if you tried it once and it didn't work, you get 40%, you got to do it again. And the reason that is because the more synchronized those cows get, and over the years, we can really type things up, okay? So if we look at the distribution of days postpartum on that herd number 5, they had the lowest pregnancy rate out of that group, okay? And this is days postpartum at the day of AI. And you can see how spread that is, right? So we have cows that were as high as 120 days postpartum and as low as 34. And we know that these cows that are lower days postpartum, 30 days or so, they're really going to struggle. They're not going to respond as well as those cows that have at least 50, 70 days postpartum at the time of AI. If we look at herd number 4, the one that had the largest or the best pregnancy rates, they were doing at that time fixed time AI for 7 years. And look how tight that is. Look at the distribution of days postpartum at the moment of AI, right? Look how tight that is. So those cows will respond better to that protocol, okay? And as we stick to it and we do it again, and we get more cows pregnant earlier, and the next year we do it again, we synchronize, get more cows pregnant earlier, that distribution of days postpartum gets tighter, right? So it is a process. And I really hope that if you're gonna try and start fixed time AI on your cattle this year, that if you have a result that's lower than what you expected, that you will stick with the technology because in the long term, it really will show the best results, right? So again, several advantages of using fixed time AI, but primarily, really the ability to increase the proportion of females that are exposed to AI and they can get pregnant in a shorter period of time. And thinking a long term, really the ability of seeing this year post year of having more and more cows pregnant early that can then get calve early and get pregnant again and again. There's a lot of value on that. One of the best studies out there that really illustrate the ability of using fixed time AI to shorten the calving season, shorten the breeding season, and shorten the calving season is this study out of Dr. Lamb's group that was published back in 2012. So very simple study. They wanted to compare two different production systems. One that we're going to call a control that only used a 90-day with natural service, so only using bulls for a 90-day breeding season. And then another group that we're going to call the timed AI group, that all the cows were synchronized using a 7-day cosync plus cedar protocol. And then after they were AI, they were exposed to a 90-day breeding season with natural service bulls. Okay. So the biggest difference here between those two groups of cows was the synchronization up front or not. So when we look at the calving distribution between those two groups of cows, in red, the cows that were synchronized, and in gray, the cows that were the control and all exposed to bulls. We look at distribution of calves born within days of the calving season. You can see that within the first 20 days of the calving season, 44% of the cows that were synchronized before the breeding season calved within those first 20 days, versus only about 25% of those cows that were not synchronized got pregnant and calved within the first 20 days. Now, thinking retrospectively, these cows that calved earlier, they became pregnant early, right? So the majority of those cows probably became pregnant by time they eye or became pregnant on that first cycle of the bull, cleanup bulls. But again, about a 20% difference there between cows that were synchronized, that were able to calve within the first 20 days of the calving season versus cows that were not synchronized. Okay, and one of the biggest differences on that study was on the pounds of calf, on here in kilograms of calf weaned per cow exposed. Okay, so cows that were synchronized weaned more pounds or kilograms of calf per cow compared to our control, right? That difference there is 17 kilos or 38 pounds. A big difference, okay? So on that study, they went on then to look at an economic analysis of using that synchronization, okay? There were several assumptions that were made, and this study was performed in 2007, so these numbers are from 2007, but a lot of them will hold true to what we see now, okay? So an average bull price of $3,200, savage bull price about 3.60 cents per pound. The semen that they use on that site was $13, which is probably a little bit lower than most commercial semen that people use. But one of the biggest things that went into that economic model assumption was the reduction in bull to cow ratio. Okay, so with the thinking that if I get 50% of my cows pregnant by AI, then I only need half of my bull power to be able to get those cows that do not get pregnant by the time they eye pregnant by the bull, right? So if I'm using a 1 to 25 bull to cow ratio, then I could go up to a 1 to 50, for example, which in this study was a 1 to 17 to a 1 to 34, okay? So they did an increased returns versus decreased costs, or increased costs to calculate the gain or the economic gain, right? So very simple economic analysis. The costs, the increase in costs with the use of synchronization and AI versus the increasing returns. And with the data in 2007, it was about a $50 difference or advantage per cow exposed when they were synchronized before the breeding season in comparison to those cows that were not synchronized, okay? So if you break it all, this is with all the different herds that were enrolled on that study, you can see that, depending on the herd, we have the difference in gain per cow exposed as high as $140 and even a location that actually lost $6 per cow exposed when they use fixed time AI versus um, just using the natural service, right? But in average and overall, an advantage of $50 per cow, right? And my goal here in a few slides is to discuss a couple scenarios that would show the difference between those operations and why some operations made so much more money than others, okay? But again, overall, about $50. So one of the biggest things that will drive the needle on this equation is the ability to use less bulls, because we're getting more cows pregnant by time they eye, and therefore we don't need as much bull power, right? So if you pay a lot of money from your bull, then your ability to make more money using fixed time AI, it's higher, okay? So a couple scenarios, if you keep everything else constant, okay? And if you buy bulls for about $2,500, then your gain per cow exposed to AI using the model is about $40, okay? Because your decreased costs of buying less bulls is lower than, for example, in a scenario of somebody that's paying $4,500 per bull, okay? And the ability to only buy, instead of buy 2 bulls, for example, only buy 1 bull and save $4,500, right? So again, you can look at those numbers and make different decisions, right? So, but the question that comes after usually I show this data is, well, can we really increase the bull to cow ratio after fixed time AI? So for example, if I have 100 cows and I use usually 4 bulls during my breeding season, if I do time AI, can I only use 2 without sacrificing pregnancy rates after fixed time AI, right? So I want to share you some data that we collected here in Virginia Tech over the last couple of years. So we work with the Virginia Department of Corrections in one of my jobs here at the vet school, and we work with them, their client, and we manage their cattle and also have access to a lot of data. So what we did, we look at the data for the past 10 years. So we have a fall and a spring breeding season. So a total of about 20 breeding seasons that we retrospectively looked at the bull to cow ratio after fixed time AI and the correlation with pregnancy rates. Okay, so all the cows are synchronized, AI'd, and then exposed to a bull for about a 70-day breeding season. Okay, and the data it's divided in spring and fall breeding season here. But what we're looking here on the left panel, panel A, is pregnancy rate by total number of cows exposed per bull, right? So a bull to cow ratio of total number of cows. And we had as high as a 1 to 73, I believe, and as low as a 1 to 15, 1 bull to 15 cows. And if you look at that trend line, it's pretty flat. You know, what that means is that the bull to cow ratio have very little correlation with pregnancy rates during the breeding season after fixed time AI in the spring. On the fall, which is our red plot here, you can see that curve goes, you know, there's a little bit more of an angle to it. There's a significant correlation, but a very weak correlation between bull to cow ratio after time AI in the fall. So there's some correlation, but there's a very weak correlation, okay? If we look at only open cows, so the ratio of open cows, right, bull to open cows. So when we preg check those cows and we knew these, out of those 100 cows, we got 50% of them pregnant by AI, then we did only the open cow, bull per open cow ratio, and we see very similar results. A weak and it's sometimes significant, but very weak correlation between bull to cow ratio after fixed time AI on pregnancy rates to the whole season, okay? So what that means is that when you consider all the cows, there was only about 1 to 4% of the observed variation on our overall pregnancy rates that were attributed to that bull to cow ratio, okay? And when we consider only the open cows, so the cows that were not pregnant by AI on that bull to cow ratio, that variation is a little bit, there was a little bit more influence of the bull to cow ratio, but still a very weak correlation, okay? So when we can do this, when we look at this data, I can tell you with a lot of certainty that you can increase your bull to cow ratio after doing fixed time AI without compromising pregnancy rates, right? So that assumption on that economic model that we can cut in half our bull population after using fixed time AI without compromising pregnancy rates holds true according to our data, okay? So looking at our study, bull to cow ratios as high as 1 to 50 can be used without any problem, okay? When you're using fixed time AI. So on that scenario where we had 100 cows and we usually buy 4 bulls to breed those cows in the breeding season, I can easily buy 2 bulls, use fixed time AI, breed the cows, and then have 2 cleanup bulls without compromising pregnancy rates. So out of that economic model from the paper from Dr. Lam came the AI calculator, which is available on the beefrepro.org website under the resources tab. You can download for free this spreadsheet. Used to be an app, and we're working to get that app up again. Unfortunately, we lost the contract and we had to redevelop the app. But the Excel spreadsheet works just as well, and it does the same calculation. But what it does is it allows you to input your numbers, the numbers of your operation, to then do that economic model and take a look if on your operation you would be either making or losing money when using fixed time AI. Okay, and what I'm going to do now, I'm going to open up here our website. And hopefully you can still see my screen. Hey, Kai, can you make sure that everybody can still see my screen?
Yep, you're good to go, Vitor.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to open here the AI calculator, and I just want to simulate a couple scenarios with you guys. Okay, so this is how it looks like. Very simple, and allows you to enter up your data, right? So if you don't know, for example, how much you spend a year with bull maintenance, for example, it has, if you just put your mouse on top of it, it has some national averages, okay? So for most people, it costs between $400 and $700 a year to maintain a bull. So if you say $600, for example, right? What's the price that you paid for your bulls? I recently saw the Florida bull test sale, and I think the average bull was about $3,500. How many years you're going to use that bull? So let's say 5 years. The savage value, right? So depending on the market, how much you can get from that bull, and bull weight, for example, interest rates you can change, a couple things there. How many cows do you have? Right? So if you're going to say 50 cows, for example, in an operation, usually you would have 2 bulls. And then with that assumption that with fixed time AI, you can have half of your bull power. So let's say 1 bull, your wean calf crop, you can change that. But let's say, 85% on a bad year, a bad scenario. If you do 90%, if you do a really good job. What's your average weaning weight for your calves, and what's the calf price that you would get? And I failed to look at the price today, but let's say that's correct there. Okay, so now the costs there are related to the AI itself, right? So do you need to hire someone to help you run the cattle through the chute to get them synchronized, for example? And what will be the price per cow, for example? So let's say it's $5, not $500, but $5 per head. If you need to rent a chute, for example, or if you need to make some improvements so that you can run your cattle safely through the chute a couple more times. So let's say if you need to do some improvements, let's spend $500 or maybe even more than that, so $10 per head. And for a standard 7-day co-sync seeder protocol, the cost of that protocol is going to be around $14, let's say $15, just to be safe there. And then here, semen, right? What's the price of the semen that you want to use? Let's say $25. And how much money you want to pay or you need to pay for AI technician, for example, if you cannot AI your own cattle. I talked to a friend today, Kellen Waters, and she told me she charges $10 per cow when she AIs, right? So using those numbers, you could expect a gain of $22 per cow exposed when using fixed timed AI, and a total herd gain of about $1,000, $1,100. Okay. Now, the biggest difference here, again, if you buy really expensive bulls, so let's say I buy a $5,000 bulls, you can see their numbers go up, right? Similarly, if your costs of AI are going to be higher, if you're going to use very expensive semen, of course, your gain is going to go lower. It's going to go down, right? And if you need to do big investments to improve your facilities, it might take a couple of years to recover that investment by using fixed timed AI. But it's a really simple tool that can help you simulate a couple scenarios and see whether or not just looking at total pounds of calf produced, as well as the savings that you can have on using fixed timed AI, the ability to either make money or not. So again, a good tool to simulate your scenarios and input your own data there. So in summary, and I made this joke last year, so I'll do it again. Beef cattle reproductive physiologists are terrible at economic analysis, right? And it's amazing. I joke with my friends that work on dairy cattle, and they really got it down to the penny, right? How much it costs to breed a cow, and what's the price of a pregnancy. And we're a little behind on the beef industry, and we need to have people that are not reproductive physiologists like me, but are ag econ people to really look into this. But anyway, reproductive efficiency is really important. It's the only way we're going to achieve profitability on a beef cow calf operation. And we need to be able to use those reproductive technologies that are available to us to achieve reproductive efficiency. And fixed timed AI, it's really this powerful tool that not only allows us to use artificial insemination, but the biggest power of fixed timed AI is this ability to have more cows pregnant early in the season that will make our cows calve early in the season and have this effect of increasing the pounds of calf that we can produce per cow exposed, because those calves are born earlier and can perform better. So with that, I don't know what time it is, but I appreciate the opportunity, and I want to take the time to answer a couple questions if we have them. So please,
Yep.
we're
So
nice
please get
use the
your
Q&A to do that. Okay.
Yeah, Vitor, and the Q&A is filling up, so I'll let you just go through. I'll just make one point here that Larry Rowden has chatted in, and I think you ended on this, that the reproductive advantage is independent of the genetic gain, and I think that's really important to keep in mind that, you know, what you just mentioned there at the end about how much you get in reproductive gain alone without thinking about the genetics of it.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, one aspect, you know, we tend to focus, especially on the economic analysis, focus on selling calves, right? But the power of retaining or replacement heifers out of those cows that get pregnant early, and we know we have data now, Dr. Cushman out of Nebraska showing that those heifers that are born early, they become cows that calve early, they get pregnant early, and they calve early, and they wean heavier calves for up to 6 breeding seasons and calving seasons, and they will remain longer in the herd. So this power of having more cows pregnant early and calving early, it's really an amazing. So I'm gonna read some of the Q&A here. A dairy person, very small herd, all heifers, AI, 1.2 service per conception, all have a small beef herd. 2009, we tried to AI 5 heifers, utilize and utilize and visual observation of heats, 0 conceptions. In 2020, we bred 5 heifers using seeders followed by PGF, only one settled for service, all others re-inseminated. Why is AI so much more successful in dairy heifers? So one thing that I think we need to keep in mind is in general, those dairy heifers are sometimes, you know, they're fed better, for example, and they have reached puberty. So there's a lot of things that will influence the success of fixed time AI on heifers, right? And some of them, body condition score, age, and reproductive soundness, right? So we recommend that you do a reproductive track score, which is something that a veterinarian can do very easily, where we evaluate how mature those animals are before breeding. And we know that it's a 1 to 4 scale, and we know the heifers that have a 3 or 4, so those heifers that are cycling will do much better than those cows that are not cycling. A lot of times the protocol will induce cyclicity, but will fail to get them pregnant, but it will definitely help them get pregnant later. So, you know, don't think that the synchronization will fix all, right? Again, body condition score in both heifers and cows, days postpartum on cows for sure, and reproductive maturity on heifers will definitely affect your success. Do you believe, based on actual costs and results, that utilizing sex semen in a large commercial cow-calf program would be profitable? I think that the ability to use sex semen can be profitable, especially if you want to sell, for example, bred heifers. If you have the ability to sell heifers, if you have your own sale, you could strategically use sex semen to do that. Or, for example, on the other way, and I'm not sure if I know anybody that does that, but if you want to create steers only, if you have contract with a feeder, for example, like you could do this. And I'll point you out again towards the sex semen protocol sheet that we just released, right? And I think a couple of things that people need to understand is, yes, your fertility will be reduced when using sex semen, so we need to use that very strategically, okay? So we know that cows or heifers that show estrus will have a greater probability of becoming pregnant, and so we can use, and with sex semen that's the same, that's true, so we can use sex semen, for example, on cows that showed estrus before time they eye, and then the cows that didn't show estrus, we can then use commercial semen. So I think there's strategies, there are ways that we can use sex semen and make it profitable, right? Um, so, but just synchronizing, use sex semen on the whole herd, I think that you probably have a point there, would be difficult. But strategically, I think it makes sense, and we're getting better. Technology is improving with sexing and as well as synchronization. So we have a lot of people, smart people working on this, and I'm sure we'll see even better results in the future. So strategically, I think that yes, we can definitely use this. From the graph just shown, would you recommend waiting 70 days from the start, the sync process? So Dr. Jeff Stevenson out of Kansas has a really good meta-analysis where they looked at the factors that will affect pregnancy rates on mature beef cows after synchronization. And the two main things were, again, days postpartum and body condition score. So out of that data, which I believe has over 10,000 inseminations, the cutoff was 70 days postpartum, and a body condition score of 5 or greater has the best synchronization, pregnancy rates to synchronization. Now, 70 days, especially for people that do not have a very tight breeding season, can be difficult to achieve. So the recommendation that I tell people, I would not put a seeder on anything that's less than 30 days postpartum. If you want to push and you want to put a seeder on something that's 30 days postpartum and then breed her at 40 days, I could see that happening. But I would recommend waiting at least 45 days to start the protocol, so that by the time you breed, those cows are 55 days postpartum. So, but again, according to data, yes, 70 days is the best. But again, it's difficult to achieve on all herds. But over the years, with repeating Astro Synchronization and make sure you get a lot of cows pregnant early and they're calving early, so that they have a lot of days postpartum by the beginning of the next breeding season, you can definitely achieve that. Would you say that the cattle that were AI experienced heavier weaning weights due to the ability to use better bulls? So that's a good question. So on that study specifically, they tried to use natural service bulls and AI bulls. They had similar EPDs for growth on those calves. With it's not perfect, but the idea there was to, okay, let's try to eliminate the genetic potential of those calves because they were sired by bulls that have greater EPDs, for example, or better EPDs. So on that study specifically, they balanced EPDs between natural service bulls and AI to try to eliminate that. But for sure, if you're going to compare just the bull that you buy, your average bull that you buy on a sale compared to the bull that you can buy on those AI studs, those AI companies, genetic companies, you're definitely going to have a genetic improvement as well on the capacity of those calves to grow. So yes, they will play a role as well. Were all cows bred, meaning those that did not express a heat also? I'm not sure if that question for Ronnie, if that's about that study that I shared on the Rogers study. All cows were AI, independent if they were heat or not. So 100% of the cows received or had the opportunity to become pregnant to AI, independent if they had shown estrus or not before insemination, and then were exposed to the bull. So are you figuring carcass price on those 500-pound calves? I do not understand where you're getting the savage bull price and the calf price. So what I showed there initially on that economic model was the prices on 2007, and then today, just going some rough averages based on the data that we have on that spreadsheet. But again, you can download it right now for free and input the prices on your area for both calf prices and what you're going to get for a savage on a bull. Thomas Dingus, there are males and females in the calf crop. Typically, the makes in commercial herds are sold. what's the value of the retained females? And I believe we touched that on a little bit. But again, retaining retaining those females that are born early, we understand now how powerful that is. Those heifers that are not only sired by AI, so they have greater genetic potential, but they also were born early. They will wean heavier. They'll be older by the next breeding season, most likely cycling already, have reached puberty, have an increased chance of becoming pregnant early, and they'll calve early. They have more time to recover as a first calf heifer, which is usually our females that struggle the most, right? Our first calf heifers. So she has an advantage there because she calved early, is going to have more time to recover over that second breeding season, can get pregnant early again, and it's just a snowball effect of always getting pregnant early, calving early, and having time to recover. So for sure, have an added effect on that. You showed a huge impact on days postpartum pregnancy per time they eye when using the technology first year. Any strategies to overcome the problem? Early weaning, nutritional flushing. So again, yeah, if you're gonna start using fixed time for the first time and you have a very long breeding season, probably the best thing to do is to break your herd into different groups, right? So you're going to have your early calving cows, your cows that calved first. You make a group of those cows, whatever, for example, has 40 days postpartum, and then you start your synchronization. And then you can, then a couple weeks after that, you can group another bunch of cows that already calved, and then at that time have around 40 days postpartum or so, and then you can synchronize them and do it again. And if you do that over 2 or 3 years, what happens is you're going to start eliminating those cows that calve late and concentrating on your cows that calve early. And it's a process again. You can do it over years, and eventually, instead of having 3 groups of synchronization, you're going to have 1 group of synchronization because you have more cows getting pregnant early. There's a really good extension publication out of the University of Florida that I wrote with Dr. Cliff Lamb, and it goes through the process of establishing a Astro Synchronization program and shortening a breeding season. So it's called the NFRC case study. So we went from a 120-day breeding season to a 70-day breeding season over 5 years using fixed time day eye. So I highly recommend you guys take a look at that. Your cost AI versus just bulls, the 3,500 bull that you use, you figure that you use that bull for 4 years or just the initial years? No, using your the useful life, so accounting for 4 years, not only that 1 year. Okay, so yes. Is time day eye most economically beneficial for mature cows or heifers, or does it matter? So in general, a lot of people will only AI their heifers. That's something that we've seen, and we're starting to see people change that. But I don't know if it's more economically in heifers or in cows. I think the biggest advantage is probably going to be seen in cows because of the ability to induce cyclicity, especially on those cows that are struggling on days postpartum. They have a poor body condition score, for example. But I think that a lot of people will start doing heifers, get more comfortable with the process, because again, it's a process, right? You need to learn, get comfortable with giving injections, running your cattle more efficiently through the chute, and then they'll move on to doing cows once they're more comfortable with the process. But I haven't seen anything that compares using only heifers versus using cows, but I would argue that it's economically beneficial in both. And where you probably will see the biggest advantage is on your cows. How soon after fifth time I suggest putting the cleanup bull? So I would say, if you don't care if your calves are sired by the bull or the AI, I would say put it right away. We usually wait 10 days so that when we pre-check, we can clearly tell the difference between the AI calves versus AI pregnancies versus the natural service bulls pregnancies. But if you want to wait 7 days, 5 days, and put the bulls, I think that's perfectly fine. And even if you want to put the day after, I think that's okay. If you have any cows that come in here late for some reason, which sometimes happens, that bull will catch that cow. So if you don't really care about whether if you're not going to do genetic testing and you really want these cows to be pregnant by the bull or this specific bull, then I wouldn't really wait any time. We currently utilize a veterinarian for AI services for a small herd. This is being very successful, but the expense per cow is significant. Are there resources to locate AI technicians that would serve small producers? So we used to have that on the AI calculator app. Unfortunately, that app is down, and like I said, we're working to get that app published again. But we had a locator services where it would link you to people around your area that would offer the service. I think that probably your best bet is to contact your extension agent, your extension specialist on your state, and they can point you towards the right direction. The other thing that I would recommend too is go and take the AI course. And if you haven't done that, I think there's a couple benefits of doing an AI course and learning how to AI. One, those AI courses, they go beyond just the AI technique, right? We'll discuss reproductive management, nutrition, and genetic selection, and a bunch of other subjects that are very important for any cow-calf producer. The second is learning the technique. If you ever learn AI, you can say that it's not something that you're going to take the course and tomorrow you're going to go and AI 100 cows. It takes some time, right? It takes practice. Like driving takes miles, AI takes cows to get comfortable. But you can get comfortable and you can AI your own cows. There's no big secret. It's just a matter of practice. And then at the time you can AI your own cows, then your prices, your costs really go down, right? So hopefully you can use your extension personnel and also take advantage of an AI course to do this.
Hey, Vitor, we're running short on time. Yeah, if you can just maybe take one last question here in regards to the reduction in bull power with TAI on small operations. You turn out bulls, you have problems with bulls frequently hurting their feet, reproductive issues. What's your experience and thoughts on that? And then the question right below that, do you still recommend a 1-to-50 bull ratio in a first-year TIA experience, thinking in a potential 45% pregnancy rate? If you have other questions, please get those into the beefrepro.org, ask the expert, and we'll try to get as many of those answered as they come into our email. So with that, Vitor, I'll let you wrap up with that question and end us for tonight.
Sure. So yes, one thing that I didn't make very clear, but on that retrospective study, every bull was subjected to a BSE exam, right? And were successful on passing a BSE exam. So we need to make sure, independent of using fixed time AI or not, or synchronization or not, you need to make sure you're testing your bulls every year. And in places where we have 2 breeding seasons, like here, we're testing them twice a year to make sure they're able to breed before the breeding season starts, right? The other thing that's important, yes, if you're going to reduce in half your bull power, and you know you have pastures that have rocks and you have a history of bulls getting hurt, I would keep a close eye on that, right? Make sure that you're watching your herd closely to avoid any accidents. And if that happens, that you can see it as soon as possible so that you can act, right? You can call a veterinarian, for example. The other thing that I would add on that study, the 1-to-50, right? We had as high as 1-to-73 and still didn't have a problem on pregnancy rates. So if you have 100 cows, you cut down to 2 bulls and you lose 1 bull, you can still be pretty safe on that 1 to 50 bull to cow ratio. Now, if you're going to use fixed time IVF for the first time, would you still cut in half? And I'll say yes. If you make sure your bull it's ready to go and it's able to breed and has passed a breeding sounds exam, I would not be afraid of using half of my bull power, even though I could expect a little bit lower pregnancy rates because it's the first time using timed AI. Okay, so, but again, watch it closely. Make sure you're paying attention and you're selecting the best bull that you can afford based on your operation. Okay, so thank you very much, and we will post the recording on our YouTube channel, and I'll encourage everyone to follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can be up to date on everything that we do here at the Beef Reproduction Task Force. Thank you very much.